Okay, we'll move on. So we're going to move towards more green issues next. And this question comes from a citizen in Sligo. And they've asked, what are the nature-based solutions envisaged for EU budget funding under climate action?
Nature-based solutions.
Yes.
Well, I would say, I talked about the what we call the MFF, the budget. We've laid out what's called the MFF, the budget framework, and the recovery package now for the next 7 years. The Commission has laid this out. It amounts to 1.75 trillion over 7 years, mainly front-loaded to help in the recovery. At least a third of that, and probably more in practice, will be related to dealing with climate change. Now, it'll be, to a fair extent, it'll be up to each member state as to how they would spend that money in relation to dealing with climate change, because the targets, the ceilings have been set by the member state level. But anything, I would argue that in relation to your question, nature related, I would argue that anything that's spent on climate change is directly or indirectly related to nature, because that's what climate change is all about. But at least I think it's 30% is a minimum figure that member states will have to spend on the on climate related activities. The Common Agricultural Policy, which Ireland is probably its source of most of the direct transfers from the EU to Ireland. The Common Agricultural Policy is up for review at the moment, and at least a third of that money, I would expect, it's not finalised yet, but I would expect a third of that money will be focused on agri-environmental measures, favouring biodiversity, etc. So yeah, there's the LIFE program. There are many different programs, but there are already many programs and fundings available aimed at dealing with climate change to start with, and also dealing with nature in the purest sense, as in the grass, the trees, whatever, the environment, pollution, etc., pollution in the rivers, pollution in the air, etc. I would expect in the next 7 years, in the next budget, that is going to be reinforced massively. I mean, our aim ultimately is to have a carbon neutral economy in 2050, and to be down by 50% in 2030. That's going to involve a lot of effort, but it can be done, and it can be done with a positive impact on the environment, on the economy, rather than a negative one. People assume it's negative, it doesn't. Our estimation is that dealing with climate change is going to have a positive impact on the economies.
And you mentioned agriculture there. Would you say that changing the way we do agriculture and getting buy-in from those involved in agriculture is one of the biggest challenges to implementing a kind of a European Green Deal?
Yeah, I wouldn't say, and I've said this to many farmers and farm organisations, I wouldn't say it's one of the biggest challenges. In fact, looking at the difference, if I just look at Ireland at the different sectors, such as transport, housing, agriculture, and someone said to me, which one do I want to pick to solve? Which one do you want to be responsible for? I would rather have the agricultural one. It's held up as the biggest problem, but actually I think that the one with the most potential to have solutions. And I keep saying to farm organisations, be part of the solution, not part of the problem. I mean, you have people going around talking about, we need this silver bullet, we need to develop a mechanism that can capture carbon. Nature has developed this mechanism years ago. It's called photosynthesis. It's called grass. It's called hedgerows, whatever. And the farmers are in charge of this. So the cap is going to be greener. And I've been on farms that are very carbon neutral and have very high output. So it's doable. And the expertise is out there and it's developing all of the time. And it'll be in long term, it will be, or even medium term, it will be in the farmer's interest that we will make more money that way eventually.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to move on now to, again, completely change direction, but we will come back to green issues in a moment. But before that, I have a question from John in Blanchardstown. It's quite a detailed question. So, again, I'm just going to look at my notes for this one. In what way do you think the Commission competencies might best expand to allow citizens to better see the importance of the EU? Now, for example, He gives as an example here. Could you imagine the EU paying all the public pensions of all European citizens from its own budget? Such an association with an important policy would promote a positive view of Europe. So that's the example he's given. What would your view be on something like that?
To answer the example first, no. I don't ever see well, no, I wouldn't say never, but not in the near term do I see a situation where people's pensions or whatever will be paid from the European budget. It's a step too far for the member state. Just to put it in context, of all public expenditure, because people don't realise how small the EU budget is in a public expenditure context, of all public expenditure spent in the EU today, the EU budget is only 1%, so it's almost insignificant. And if you talk about pensions, it's a huge chunk of public expenditure in the member states. So I don't see us moving that. I don't see us moving that far. But I think the difficulty is it's not what we need to do in terms of promoting the EU. Do extra. We will be doing extra, but that is not. The difficulty is that citizens don't appreciate today everything around them, which is linked. Is there because of the EU. I mean, the environment, whether you like the environment, whether you think the environment is good or bad, it's a hell of a lot better today because we're members of the EU than we would be without that. Same with the economy. The internal market, the existence of the internal market and the access of Ireland's exports to the internal market is worth multiples of what Ireland pays or benefits in terms of financial transfers every year. The focus is always on how many billions we take in, how many billions we get out. This is insignificant in comparison to the benefit. The benefits right across in virtually every walk of life that people are experiencing every day, but don't appreciate that they're coming from the EU. We should start by trying to explain that. I mean, this is our job also, but too often selling the EU is left to the European Commission, which we're very small. We're very small in terms of numbers. Member state governments and state authorities and the citizens and organisations, it's their responsibility to explain and defend and sell the EU. Now there's a process of consultation and discussion starting, which would take it would have started already except for the COVID outbreak, but I expect it will start in the autumn on the future of Europe. Where are we going? Are we looking at more integration or what? The three institutions, the Commission, the Parliament and the Council are discussing developing. We have now, as of yesterday actually, all three institutions have established their own position in terms of this future discussion, and now we have to get together and have one common position. And every citizen in Ireland and across the European Union will have an opportunity to contribute to that, where they want to see the European Union going, and we will be very active. And hopefully the government will be very active in consulting Irish people. Some people across Europe, some governments, some prime ministers, believe there needs to be deeper integration, which requires treaty change. When you mention treaty change, a lot of countries, including Ireland, the Irish government, get very worried about that because they have to have a referendum. And if they have a referendum, the risk is it becomes a referendum on something that has nothing to do with what's on the table. We've been down this road in Ireland twice already. But certainly there's going to be a very major discussion over the next few years. Personally, I think we need to deepen what we have. We have an awful lot of legislation there that isn't 100%, isn't used to its full capacity. And we could start by improving that. For example, we have a lot of soft power on the global stage because we spend we're a big economic power. We would have a lot more soft power where we're able to take decisions in relation to foreign affairs, but qualified majority. At the moment, it's unanimity. To change that, we would need everyone to agree that we can take a decision by qualified majority. And then we wouldn't have one country holding up our position on vis-a-vis, some human rights issue, wherever. So we could start by, using better the tools we have. And certainly, yes, we need to discuss where we're going, but while we're discussing where we're going, maybe we better check where we are and see whether we can improve on that.
I think last year the 45 Stories initiative did a great job at showing Irish people some of the real benefits that have come about. And I mean, even in my lifetime, everything from equality in the workplace to the mobile phone roaming charges, these are all benefits. GDPR recently as well. These are all major benefits that have all come from the EU, and I suppose people, and part of my job is to make sure people are aware that these came from the European level.
Yeah. Funny you should mention the roaming charges. I mean, the roaming charges got more positive PR for the European Union than anything else, and it's bordering on being irrelevant in the economic context. But it caught people's imagination. And I should say, edicts have a major role to play, and you do a very fine job. That's why you're there, to explain to people the role of the EU and how EU is in every person's life every day. And the EU gets a lot of bad press from people who have ulterior motives. No decision is taken at an EU level which is against the interest of the system. It's always taken in the interest of the system, always. Maybe when something is decided in the interest of the citizen, it does damage to maybe a company, and they have every interest in downgrading that decision because it's impacting them. But it's designed to be to the benefit of the maximum number of citizens.
Mm-hmm. And just before I go on to the next question, I will just remind people that the Europe Direct Centres around Ireland we are still open for business. We may be operating from home or partially from home, but if you have questions, you have queries, please send them in to us. We're there to answer them. So we'll move on from that. So the final question is quite a specific question, actually, and we go back to the west of the country, to Galway, for this question. So it's to do with the Regional Spatial and Economic Strategy 2020 to 2032. And the citizen has made the point that this strategy cannot be greener and smarter, as it's often described, if it also promotes the CO2 boosting Galway City Ring Road. This is in relation to the strategy recently published by the Northwestern Regional Assembly. So could you comment on this? Is there a disconnect there between the focus on this ring road and then the CO2 levels? Is there what would your view be on that?
Well, no, the Commission wouldn't say, well, these projects, okay, they have to pass certain environmental criteria. But I mentioned earlier on that the EU has a global target in terms of cutting emissions, etc. And then the countries have to put their target, and it's up to the country then as to how they are going to put that target. So that's whether Ireland wants to build more roads or not build more roads. I think that's their decision. Mm-hmm. However, I think just because you're building a motorway doesn't necessarily mean you're going against your climate change ambition. I've sat in traffic jams around Galway. I would have been very happy with the motorway, and there was a hell of a lot of pollution around. It's quite possible with a new motorway that you have more effective and more efficient travel, and of course we are going down the road of the electric car. With the electric car, we still need growth, but in terms of whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, this is not the road of pollution.
Okay. So that would be more of an internal issue for a country itself. Okay, well, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, Gerry. I've certainly learned a lot, and I hope the people who are watching these videos have learned and will maybe now be inspired to go off and learn a little bit more about exactly what the EU has done for us. It's a little bit a case of what have the Romans ever done for us, and that's an analogy I often use when I'm explaining it to people. And I said the information is all available at the Europe Direct Centres. We can get it to you one way or another. The libraries are beginning to open a little bit at the moment where the centres are. So, feel free to pop in and ask your questions. So once again, Gerry, thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you. It was a very, 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 very useful exercise. I would recommend it, and I would recommend to everybody to make contact with their local edict, because that's what you're there for. And in your comment on the Romans, I was going to say their roads are gone, but the roads of the European Commission are still there. So, all right. No, thank you. I'm happy to do this anytime. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Gerry.